Hi everyone, and welcome to Tuesday's Tips with Lauri. Today I want to share just a couple of different types of tips. One, we're going to talk about stabilizer with our boardwalk. Isn't this beautiful? I love this vintage boardwalk quilt. And the second thing we're going to talk about are the pinwheels. Right here you can see one of the pinwheels in the quilt. And we're going to talk about how to make your pinwheels perfect. Just exactly the way you want them to be to fit perfectly into your quilt. So to start with, the first thing I want to cover is stabilizer. One thing about stabilizer, and I've got 4 different types of stabilizer here. The first one we usually use a lot when we're embroidering. It's the heavy cutaway. This isn't one I would recommend for this type of a project, and I'll explain why in a minute. I would recommend that you would use either a tearaway that tears away pretty simply and easily, or no-show mesh lightweight cutaway. The reason I like these two, if you don't want any stabilizer left in your project whatsoever, this is what I would recommend. And the reason I like the paper tear is this one tears pretty easily. So as soon as you get done with your project, you would be able to tear it away really quickly. Now I would caution, I would not use a tearaway stabilizer behind something that's got delicate stitches. So if you're looking at stitches that are just like a bean stitch or just little words or the swoosh. For example, right here, I'm just going to pull this down. This is perfect example. This right here, I'm not sure I would use a tearaway personally because see this right here? This is a swoosh. That's what I'm talking about when I say a swoosh. And that right there, you don't want to rip any of those stitches out because it's just a bean stitch. So it's just got like a triple stitch. And I would highly recommend on the word blocks to use the lightweight cutaway, the no-show lightweight cutaway. And it's called a no-show mesh, is actually the name of the product if you're wondering what I'm talking about when I say lightweight. It, like, you can wad it up, it feels just like a piece of fabric, if you will. This is what I would recommend using through your whole quilt if you'd like, if you're wanting your quilt to feel nice and pliable. But if you're wanting things cut, or you don't want any stabilizer at all in your quilt, then you would go with the tearaway. Now the wash away is also an option, and do keep in mind we have both the sewing version, and we do recommend using this in some of the sewing version portions, but also the embroidery version. There's all these wonderful projects that you can make that are on the back right here, and for the different projects you may choose a different type of stabilizer. That's why in the instructions it does mention that you can use all 3 types of stabilizers, because there are different times when you might want to use a heavier one. For example, on your tote bag, you might want to just use a heavy cutaway and leave that in your tote bag to give it the durability and the sturdiness that you want. So if you just think, what am I going to use this for? What purpose is my project going to take on for me? Or if it's a gift and you want it to be durable, then you would use the heavier cutaway. If you were wanting a quilt that you can snuggle in, you want to wrap around somebody, then I would definitely highly recommend the lightweight cutaway for something like that. So I hope that makes that a little bit clearer. I know that we've had a couple people ask about stabilizers, and those are the 4 basic stabilizers that you will probably ever use when you're quilting and doing embroidery. And we do use a lot of stabilizers in our sewing versions too, so that is something you'll want to take note of too as you're making your sewing version. All right, to get started with pinwheels. To start with, you're going to cut your pieces just like they say, and then we're going to pretend like that's still one full piece. This would have been the line that you drew. You place your pieces right sides together. So you've got your red and your blue pieces right sides together. Then you stitch 1/4 inch away on either side of that middle line that you drew. And then you would simply take your rotary cutter and just cut right along that middle line, and it turns into 2 half square triangles. So once you have your 2 half square triangles, I would open them up and I would press them open. And you're going to do that with all of them, so you're going to end up with 12 half square triangles when you're all done making all of those. So there's 6 big pieces, obviously cut in half makes 12 of the smaller ones. Okay, so to start with, we say that we'd like for you to square that up, and I highly recommend squaring these up at this point. You can try sewing them all together if you prefer, but here's the risk that you run into. When you're sewing, if these half square triangles are not squared up, then your bigger square is going to be even more not square. It'll be more off, and that's not what you really want. So, for example, if this was just slightly off, then your pinwheel is going to kind of look crooked. So the best thing that I highly recommend are these orange pop rulers. You can get the orange pop ruler square set, and this square set right here, this is this middle piece that's sitting right here in the middle. It is a half square triangle ruler that you use to square up your half square triangles, and it's got a 2.5 one and a 4.5, so this is perfect for this project. And again, the orange pop ruler, in fact, you can use, a lot of these rulers are used for squaring up all of your projects in this quilt. A lot of really fun, I just love this. But for example, if you have something that's got like some height to it, like our Chanel trees, or anything that's got something that's got height to it, for example, this is a perfect one. This is, you would use our 4.5 by 6.5 inch ruler. You don't have to worry about your ruler toppling over the height of that. The orange pop rulers actually sit around, and that pops right out through the middle, and it's easy to center, easy to find the middle. Highly recommend these rulers for this project. All right, so now that we have our half square triangles, we're going to square these up. And this is a great question. We've had people ask, how do we square these up? Great question, because it can be very tricky. So what I like to do, there's two different ways you could do that. First one is, as you can see, if you lay this on the ruler, or on the cutting board, you can see that that is pretty square already. So I simply just trim off just the one dog ear, and then I just take my ruler, and the side that has this straight line, and this is my little 2.5 inch, that's what I'm squaring it up to. Since I don't need to trim anything on that side, then I'm just simply lay that down, lining up that line right down the middle with the middle seam on my half square triangle. I line up the outside edges with the solid outside line, not the dotted line. The dotted line is your inside seam line, so you can see what it's going to look like. And then I simply trim this excess off, and it gives me my 2.5 inch square triangle just like that. And I like rotating mats for this simple purpose of I can rotate it, I don't need to move anything else, and then I can just square it up. Now that is a simple way to square up. There's your 2.5 square triangle. And you can square these up very quickly using this ruler, and as you can see, it works out perfectly right there. All right, let's do it one more time. This time I'm going to say, oh, you know what? This looks a little bowed and a little bowed on both sides, so I don't really want to use one of these corners. I want to trim both corners off, which you can absolutely do. So what I would recommend is you use your half square triangle again, and what I like to do is I'll line up that seam line right along the middle there, and I'm going to just hold this down and trim this off so that I know that it's square. And that's why we made these a little bit larger, the half square triangles, so that you would be able to have enough fabric that you can trim from both sides if needed. So I've got that one side trimmed, and you actually could do this all in without moving your fabric, but because I'm upside down and I want you to be able to see this right side up, I'm going to do this way. And there again, I do the exact same method. I lay this on the corner. I know it's square now, and I'm going to lay this right there on the square, and this line coming down the middle lines right up, and I simply trim that, and I'm just going to swap hands here because I like to cut with both hands. And there you go. And once you have your half square triangles and they are nice and square, as those who have quilted before, when you are piecing a quilt, you want it to be exact. And if these are just like that and they're exact, they're going to fit right together exactly the way you need them to be, and they're already going to be the exact size, so you wouldn't have to trim a second time if you make sure those cuts are good the first time. And then when you sew your pinwheels together, you simply take these and you're going to obviously lay them just like it shows in the book to make your pinwheel. And then when you put them together, I just take a scant 1/4 inch seam and then you'll do the other two and put the whole thing together, and there is your pinwheel. And it's really nice and straight. Your points will meet. You'll be really happy with it. Now, one last thing, this is really cool because it's automatically, this is a 4.5 by 4.5 inside. So I can lay it over my half square triangle, and I can line up the line that's going right down catty corner for my half square triangles. My pinwheel now, I guess it is now a pinwheel, and I can look at it and say, oh, you know what, there's a little piece on that side I want to trim, and it's simply, you just simply trim that off. And I see a little piece on this side. I'm going to rotate the mat and use the other hand and just trim that off, and then there is your exact 4.5 by 4.5 inch pinwheel, and you can sew that right in your quilt, and you're going to be really happy that it's going to fit perfectly. And if you have any questions, please comment below, and we would love to answer your questions that you may have making your pinwheels, and we hope you really enjoy making the Vintage Boardwalk quilt as much as we have. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.